Hello everyone, and welcome back to my Bloodborne lore series. I'd firstly like to make a revision to the last video when I was talking about how Annalise was referring to herself as we or our. I think everyone who mentioned it definitely had a point about it being a royal tendency, and I'm glad they brought it to my attention. However, I have a counterpoint. She refers to herself in the first person as well as we. She says,
I claim no subjects, but here lieth our throne.
if she was truly using the royal we, then wouldn't she have said, we claim no subjects, but here lieth our throne? That's up for you to decide. I might just be making something out of nothing. I'd also like to thank you guys for your enthusiasm about my first lore video regarding Bloodborne. I'm glad you're open to me trying new things. Let's continue our investigation of Cainhurst by looking at Ariana, one of the more interesting characters in the game. Ariana is integral to understanding the vile bloods of Cainhurst Castle, as it is almost certain that Ariana is a former resident of Cainhurst herself. Something important to note, I am not implying that Ariana is a vile blood even though she comes from Cainhurst. There is a difference. When we find her, she is tucked away in the corner of the cathedral ward. Knocking on her door reveals to us that she is a prostitute. She says,
Oh my, what a queer scent. But I'd take it over the stench of blood and beasts any day. What is it then? I'm off during hunts, so if that's what you're here for, I'll leave you to your own devices.
from our very first encounter with Ariana, something is off. Why would a hunter smell any different from blood and beasts? By this point, you've been running around in the sewers, killing everything that moves, and being showered in blood. What is your scent? How would she even be able to smell you through a set of doors like that? One thing that is striking when comparing Ariana's opening dialogue to Annalise's is that they both smell you. While Ariana says,
Oh my, what a queer scent.
Annalise says something similar to you as you approach her throne.
Visitor, moon-scented hunter.
Already, Ariana and Annalise share a habit of smelling those that they meet, but for what reason? You have the option to send her to either Eden Chapel or Yusef's clinic, but for the purposes of this analysis, we will send her to the former. When we find Ariana at the chapel, she is thin, with blonde hair, and wears a noble dress. The noble dress, which we can acquire in Cainhurst Castle, has a description that reads, a finely tailored Bordeaux dress, worn by the nobles of the old bloodline that traces back to the forsaken Castle Cainhurst. This is one out of a few pieces of evidence that leads me to believe that Ariana is a descendant of the royal line, who perhaps escaped from Cainhurst during or before the attack by the executioners. Even though she is a prostitute, she does live in the cathedral ward, which seems to be a more affluent part of Yharnam. Perhaps prostitute is not the correct word, but maybe escort is. My point is that she's relatively wealthy, I imagine. The cathedral ward is noticeably at a higher elevation than Old Yharnam and Central Yharnam, with heavy gates in place, perhaps to keep out looters and beasts. While some NPCs act quite upset and terrified that the hunt is on, Ariana seems quite laissez-faire about the situation, saying, I'm off during hunts, as if it's a common occurrence for her. When we meet with her again in the chapel, you can speak with her, and she offers her thanks. She says,
I'd like to tender my thanks, but I haven't much to offer. All I can give is my blood.
this is instantly strange to me. Wouldn't it be her first instinct to offer her body instead, being a self-described whore? It might just be a gameplay mechanic and isn't a big deal. What is more important is the blood that she gives you. The description of the blood of Ariana reads, a member of the old healing church would know that her blood is similar indeed to precisely what was once forbidden. Forbidden blood. Where do we hear the specific meaning of forbidden blood in the game? We hear it from Alfred, who says,
Once a scholar betrayed his fellows at Bergenworth and brought forbidden blood back with him to Cainhurst Castle.
this confirms a few things for me. Firstly, Ariana is most certainly a survivor of the Cainhurst massacre at this point. I originally thought that this made Annalise incorrect in saying that there are only two vile bloods left, but then I remembered that a vile blood is only a person who has drank from the corrupted blood of the Queen. This doesn't mean that Ariana isn't a vile blood, but the possibility that she is not is also worth considering. However, this brings something else to mind. Annalise describes herself as a vile blood, meaning that she must have drunk from the blood of a previous queen with corrupted blood to be a vile blood herself. We will discuss the possible identity of this previous queen later on. We now return to what we have learned about Ariana. The scholar who betrayed Byrgenwerth didn't take the blood to Cainhurst, he brought it back with him, which means either Cainhurst was his home or at least a residence. I don't want the focus of this to switch to Byrgenwerth too much, but I think it's safe to assume that this anonymous scholar was part of Lawrence's group that decided to split from Willem's way of thinking and pursue the power of blood instead. Except in this case, blood was brought to Cainhurst and not quarantined at the Healing Church, or Byrgenwerth. While this seems to throw somewhat of a wrench in the theory that Cainhurst and their blood hunting predates Byrgenwerth and possibly Yharnam, I would like to make the point that blood dregs are not exactly the same as the forbidden blood mentioned, or Udin's blood in other words. It would be entirely possible that Arianna has imbibed the forbidden blood that was brought back to Cainhurst Castle, as evidenced by the umbilical cord, which we will discuss shortly. Mention of antiquity, the architecture and design of Cainhurst, use of the word ages in the Vile Blood Register, and the tapestries all still make me believe that Cainhurst is the oldest institution in Yharnam. This may seem trivial to some, but I believe it is an extremely important detail that should not be ignored. The collection of blood dregs and the knowledge of the Thumerians, possibly phantasms and children of blood in Cainhurst, all add to this theory, which we will discuss in detail as well later on. Let's continue with Arianna. If you choose to accept her blood as a reward, she says, "Oh good, come close, dear. Don't worry, this isn't the first time. Don't worry, I've done this before." This isn't the first time. This isn't the first time she's given blood. I find it very curious that to join the Vile Blood Covenant you need to drink from the blood of the so-called Queen, and this prostitute who wears the garb of Cainhurst, resembles Cainhurst aristocracy, and who eventually gives birth to a celestial child, aka a child of blood, also offers you to drink from her blood. Who is Arianna, and how does she fit in with Cainhurst? Before the end of this analysis, I believe we'll have a definitive answer. Arianna also refers to herself as a black sheep, after saying that the town, Yharnam, is one big family now. A black sheep, in a metaphorical sense, refers to a member of a family or group who is regarded as a disgrace to it. So, in what sense is Arianna a black sheep? Is it because she has not succumbed to the scourge and therefore not a beast? Could it be that she does not fear beasthood because she has never drunk from the blood prescribed by the Healing Church? Or is it because she is a former noble of Cainhurst and therefore an outcast and target for the Healing Church's wrath? It's important to know that the Healing Church want the Vile Bloods out of the picture so that they can control and monitor the birth of the child of blood. With Cainhurst's descendants still alive, their plan has the potential to be compromised because the child of blood can be born from a Vile Blood noble or descendant. After defeating Rom, the vacuous spider, the Blood Moon descends, and the hunt enters its third act. If we return to Uden Chapel after defeating Mikolash, we see that Arianna has vanished from her usual spot, and blood is splattered all over the floor. However, if we climb down the ladder and into the basement area of the chapel, we find Arianna and her newborn. Arianna gives birth to a celestial child, a hybrid of human and Great One. Arianna has been chosen to bear this child, something that Annalise would have considered a great honor. However, Arianna is clearly shocked by this development and cries out in terror. This is not something that she wanted. However, there is something in her final lines of dialogue that indicates that she knows what the celestial child is. She says,
It can't be. This is a nightmare.
"It can't be," is a very curious choice of writing from my perspective. When one says it can't be, it usually means that yes, they are shocked, but are also aware of the thing that is shocking them. Let's speculate for a moment and say that Arianna was royalty at Cainhurst Castle. What follows is only speculation. In her youth, Arianna's days would be spent walking the castle grounds, reading in the enormous library, drinking blood in the dining hall with her relatives. Growing up, Arianna would see her Queen Annalise walking through the halls, flanked by two silver-clad Cainhurst guards. Arianna's mother would tell her with a smile, "See our Queen? One day she will be blessed with a child of the stars, and will bring greatness to our name once again." Time and time again, Arianna would hear this prophecy foretold, the child of blood. Her friends would always whisper ghastly rumors to her, telling stories of silver-clad men bringing tied-up outsiders into the castle in the middle of the night. taking them to the Queen's chamber. Ariana wouldn't dwell on this, believing that what the Queen was doing was for the best of all of them. Her teachers would tell her that the child born of the Queen would be a god and therefore not human. They would have to accept the new being as a talisman to lead the Cainhurst name into the future. Then, one day, Ariana was in her teenage years. Strange men wearing odd golden helmets arrived at the castle gates. Why did they carry the huge wheels with them? Were they going to fix the stagecoach? Then Ariana saw what followed them. Men twice the height of her father, covered in black iron and cloaks, wielding enormous axes. Something was wrong. The knights, guards, and chevaliers of Cainhurst descended to the grounds quickly, telling the noble folk to get to the castle and library and to bar the doors. Fighting ensued, and Ariana decided that instead of hiding, she was going to escape to the nearby city, throw away her name, and start a new life. In the confusion of the fighting and slaughtering, she made it out. Fast forward to her in Erden Chapel. Somewhere far off in the distance, a hidden beast is slain, and the colour of the moon changes to a deep red through the windows of the chapel. Soon afterwards, Ariana begins to feel something inside her, churning and twisting. What is it? What begins as some pressure shortly builds to pain, terrible pain, like her insides being ripped apart. Using all of her strength, she rises from her chair and slowly, agonizingly exits the chapel. Blood splashes on the floor, coming from her undergarments as she makes her way to the basement. By the time she gets there, she is exhausted, becoming delirious from the loss of blood. Where was her hunter when she needed him? He had helped her once before, and why not now? Then the churning stopped for a moment, and she began to build again, worse and worse. Ariana gripped the armrests of the wooden chair she had found so hard that her fingernails cracked. After a long while, something splashed onto the wet floor, and the pain began to subside. After resting for a time, Ariana heard something, a slug-like sound in front of her. She looked down and saw the celestial child, covered in blood, born of her womb. "It can't be," she began to mutter. "This was meant for the Queen, not me." This is where we return to the questline. Ariana has her head in her hands, maniacally switching between laughing and crying, the celestial child waiting for attention. We are presented with a choice. Do we kill the celestial child, or leave them both alone? If we kill the celestial child, Ariana instantly dies. This isn't a video specifically focused on the relationship between Great Ones and humans, but it's immediately apparent that celestial children have a lifeline through their mother, and vice versa. This takes us down the rabbit hole of what killing Queen Yharnam would do to Murgo. After killing the celestial child, we can collect the 1/3 umbilical cord. The description reads, "Every Great One loses its child and then yearns for a surrogate, and Erden, the formless Great One, is no different. To think it was corrupted blood that began this eldritch liaison." I believe this solidifies the possibility that Ariana is a vile blood. Corrupted blood, or corrupt, is a term that is exclusively used when discussing the vile bloods. I believe that we can say that it is almost certain that it was Erden that impregnated Ariana, but that is a topic for another video. With that out of the way, we'll be discussing what I've noticed walking through the courtyard and castle itself of Cainhurst, and what we can make of it. In the courtyard, there are multiple statues everywhere, a lot of bloodlickers, and curiously, 2 dead healing church hunters wearing black church garb. The first door you go through has both a king and queen on it, with 3 women above, holding something. Inside the first hall, many ghosts can be found, along with one spectre that almost looks real in the right light, and many indentured chevaliers. The ghosts don't appear to know how to fight properly, but instead flail wildly at you with a strange-looking knife, with their hands bound. There is a black churchman praying to a queen-like marble statue. There are 3 crowned statues in this area, 1 king and 2 women. The one being prayed to has no child. Could this be Annalise? Crying echoes through the hall. In the dining hall, paintings adorn the walls, some of which match the statues in some way. On the tables there is no food, only cups, and platters that have jugs under them. Blood drinking may have occurred here. Many of the same cups and jugs appear on the floor in Annalise's chamber. There are no mirrors in the frames, yet we do find mirror textures in Mikolash's area. This may be a reference to mirrors being a apotropaic to vampires, with an apotropaic being an item to ward off evil spirits. 1 deer skull hangs over the door to the castle walls. There is a tapestry nearby to where you find the executioner's set. It depicts a woman, but there is something wrong with her hands. In one hand, she appears to be holding something circular. To me, I think it resembles a phantasm, or perhaps the auger of Ebrietas. It is something definitely slug-like and open to interpretation. Remember what Alfred says about a Byrgenwerth scholar betraying his colleagues and bringing forbidden blood back with him to Cainhurst. It is, I believe, entirely possible that this scholar might have brought something else back with him, or at least the means to find phantasms or otherwise. To me, the other hand almost resembles what your hands look like after using the Cos parasite. Let me know what you think in the comments. It's also important to mention that Ebrietas is possibly the evolved or grown version of a celestial child, something that the Cainhurst line is attempting to birth. From the looks of the library, this is where the last stand may have been made. Chairs and tables are out of place, perhaps makeshift barricades. And in the Marta Ligerius bathroom, a wolf/dog and an eagle/falcon adorn the chair that he sits in. Numbing mist is found on a dead Healing Church member, but this may not mean anything as we never find any Cainhurst bodies. They are all Healing Church models. You could say that there is a law reason for this, and that they all had to burn the bodies since the Vile Bloods don't seem to die in a way that they are used to, at least in Annalise's case, but I am not willing to jump to such a conclusion. We find parasite bugs in the small valley in the courtyard, but this is something I actually want to talk about in more detail in a future video. Let's talk about the Chikage. The Chikage is a katana-like weapon, similar to the Rikoyo, and even originates from the same place. The description of the blade reads, "Foreign-made weapon wielded by the royal guards who protect Annalise, Queen of the Vile Bloods, at Cainhurst Castle. When the intricate rippled engraving that spans the Chikage's blade is imbued with blood, the sword sings in scarlet hues. However, the rite eats away at the wielder's very essence." It seems that the Chikage was the standard weapon of the royal guard who protected Annalise. What this tells us is that the Rikoyo was either custom-made for Maria without the ability to harness the power of blood, or that the weapon was altered by Maria herself once it was in her possession. Gehrman could have aided her with this after she began her tutelage in the workshop. My basis for this is the description of the Chikage says that it is foreign-made, which is different to what is stated about the Rikoyo, which only originates from the same place as the Cainhurst Chikage. While it is arguable that they may have been from the same place, it is curious that Maria would have been allowed to wield a blade that does not utilize the power of blood, given Cainhurst's reverence for it. Regardless of Maria's disdain for blood blades, her blood still carries her family's strength, as seen in her boss battle when she uses her own blood to enhance her attacks and movement speed. We will now use this to segue to Maria herself. I venture that there will be an entire video about Maria at some point in the future, but she is worth including here. Maria was born in Cainhurst and is distantly related to Annalise, the supposed Queen of the Vile Bloods. The following comes from the description of her armor set. Among the first hunters, all students of Gehrman, was the Lady Hunter Maria. This was her hunter's garb crafted in Cainhurst. Maria is distantly related to the undead queen, but had an admiration for Gehrman, unaware of his curious mania. Stating it right up there for all of us to see, we can say that with certainty that her clothes were crafted in Cainhurst. What is interesting is that her garb she wears strongly resembles the knight's set, with the neckerchief, jewellery and trimmings. Maria's set does not include the overbearing red motif. However, she does not condone blood weaponry and seems to abhor violence to an extent after the events of the fishing hamlet. The set mentions that she is related to the undead queen. This relation and her resemblance to the knight set may indicate that she was once a guard to the queen, but either reneged on this duty or left after the executioners struck. The executioners and Gehrman's hunters seem to have worked separately, so she may not have needed to worry about the hatred that they had for her kind. Alternatively, her arrival to Yana may have required her to alter her clothing as to not stand out, all red and bombastic. Her weapon, the Rikoyo, translates from Japanese as fallen leaves or shed leaves. This is a starkly different image from the description of the Chikage, her favourite weapon from Cainhurst, which translates to blood shadow. The description of the Rikoyo reads, "A trick sword originating in the same country as the Cainhurst Chikage, only this sword feeds not off blood, but instead demands great dexterity." Lady Maria was fond of this aspect of the Rikoyo, as she frowned upon blood blades despite being a distant relative of the Queen. One can only wonder where this country of origin is. It is, of course, unknown whether Japan, as we know it, exists in the world of Bloodborne, but that isn't important. What's important is that the sword does not feed off blood like other Cainhurst weapons do, and therefore makes a distinction between the two. The reason why Maria frowns upon blood blades is, in my opinion, irrelevant to the specific investigation, as it revolves more around the fishing hamlet incident. Maria's sidearm, the Evelyn, tells us more about the Knights of Cainhurst. The description reads, "Special pistol used by the Cainhurst Knights. The Evelyn uses quicksilver bullets just as any workshop firearm, but the Cainhurst variant relies more on blood tinge. Lovingly named after a woman and graced with an intricate design, Evelyns, plural, were adored by Cainhurst Knights." There is basically no information regarding this mysterious Evelyn in the game. It is certainly possible, and I would say even likely, that Evelyn was a noble of Cainhurst at one point, and perhaps a beautiful one at that. It is really impossible to speculate in this, so I won't go any further, but what we can say is that she was beautiful and adored by the Knights of Cainhurst. Again, the investigation of Maria is limited because she is not the sole focus for this video. Onwards. Next, we will be discussing the Knights set. The complete Knight set can be acquired from a chest in the library area apart from the Knight's wig, which is found on the roof. This set has several interesting characteristics worth discussing. Firstly, one must note the elaborate nature of the design and the craftsmanship that would have gone into making clothing such as this. The wealth of Cainhurst and what it means will come into play when we are discussing the executioners in more detail. The set features intricate goldwork and jewellery adorned with the common Cainhurst motif of red. The description of the garb reads, "Attire of the Knights of Cainhurst, a regal piece graced by intricate goldwork." The Cainhurst way is a mix of nostalgia and bombast. They take great pride even in the blood-stained corpses of beasts they leave behind, confident that they will stand as examples of decadent art. What does this tell us about Cainhurst? For one, it lets us know that they actually killed beasts. If these beasts are in reference to the monsters we fight all throughout Yharnam, it illuminates us more about the Cainhurst timeline. I'm going to state now that I believe that Cainhurst did not participate in the hunt as we know it, but rather hid the fact that the blood was turning people into beasts just like the Healing Church had tried to do. I will attempt to prove this by looking at the Ritus Palash. After this point, we will return to talking about the Knight set. The Ritus Palash, which translates to equestrian broadsword or horseman's broadsword from German, sorry for my pronunciation, is a trick weapon that is both a rapier and a rifle of sorts. The description of the weapon reads, "The old nobles, long time imbibers of blood, are no strangers to the sanguine plague, and the disposal of beasts was a discreet task left to their servants or knights as they were called for the sake of appearances." Firstly, I can't help but point out again the clues that Fromm gives us regarding the age of the Cainhurst family by referring to them as both old and long-time imbibers or drinkers of blood. To imbibe something essentially means to drink it. This continues to push the possibility that the family and the descendants were vampires or blood drinkers at the very least. My point is that Cainhurst did not share Byrgenwerth's trepidation regarding the use of blood, forbidden, old, or otherwise. The nobles, according to this description, are not strangers to the sanguine plague. Sanguine, traditionally meaning blood red, is referring to a blood sickness. Now, it's important to define what exactly the description is referencing here. The sanguine plague is not the scourge of beast, as some of us might have thought. It is actually more comparable to the ashen blood sickness that struck old Yharnam. Not the same, but similar enough that it is a precursor to the scourge. What I will attempt to put forth next is somewhat speculative, but there is some proof to back it up. The Cainhurst knights, or servants, would kill those who seemed to be turning into beasts, and, quote, discreetly, even if these people were one of their own. We know that the imbibing of the blood affects some in different ways. Some are able to do so without turning beastly, like pale blood hunters, while others seem ravenous and mad for the blood, like Gascoigne. I believe both kinds existed in Cainhurst. The nobility, at least Annalise, was able to drink of the blood without turning into a monster herself, although she does wear a mask, so it is hard to tell what she looks like. The key words in the description are disposal of beasts. Even though the word beast is used, I believe it is actually referring to the people who are showing the preliminary signs of beasthood but have not transformed yet. Why would Cainhurst want these people dead? The same reason why the Healing Church had the hunters and clerics, to hide the truth of the blood and what it can do from the masses. It was a discreet task and not for the eyes of the common folk. The reason why I'm making this conclusion is because what is written about the Black Church set. It reads, "Most healing church hunters are elementary doctors who understand the importance of early prevention of the scourge, achieved by disposing of victims and even potential victims before signs of sickness manifest themselves." Early prevention. Isn't that interesting? The word disposal is used as well, just like in the Reiterpallasch description. So the Black Church servants were preventing the scourge from evolving by disposing of victims and even potential victims. I believe this is exactly what Cainhurst was doing as well, as they noticed that some of the residents of the castle growing beast-like, and these fears evolved eventually into the bloodlickers. An interesting tidbit is also at the end about getting rid of victims before signs of sickness manifest themselves. It's odd that it is worded this way. Wouldn't they be more concerned about them becoming beasts? Not in this case, as this case they would only want to get rid of people as they started showing signs of sickness and scaring the populace. The powers of the Healing Church and Cainhurst rely on their ability to maintain the appearance of a status quo, and their methods are eerily similar. Some more interesting lore points about the description of the Reiterpallasch is that it uses the word knight and servant synonymously. This goes back to my earlier theory about the servants of Cain, or soldiers of Cain, or indentured chevalier, being corrupted and twisted Cainhurst knights who were suffering from blood starvation or blood drunkenness. On a cool side note, since the Reiterpallasch and the knight's garb were originally used in tandem, it would make sense for the knight set to have spurs, which it does. To me, this pretty much confirms that the Cainhurst knights were mounted hunters. Also worth mentioning is the description of the rifle spear, a trick weapon crafted by the workshop heretics, the powder kegs, a prototype weapon serving as a simple firearm and spear, possibly created in imitation of a lost Cainhurst weapon. The rifle spear is an imitation of the Reiterpallasch. Weapon imitation is a popular concept throughout the real world, especially for firearms. There are hundreds of different imitations of historic weapons and their mechanisms, so this concept of the powder kegs mimicking the engineering of the Cainhurst is an interesting point of lore. They obviously respected the Vileblood's skill and craftsmanship in weapon building. Let's talk about the knight's wig for a moment. The description reads, "Adornment prized by the Knights of Cainhurst resembles a ponytail of silver hair." This item seems to be of some importance to Cainhurst and their knights. The most eye-catching thing about it is in the description. The hair is silver-coloured, almost white. I think there are a few possibilities about who the hair could belong to. It could be Annalise's hair, Ligarius's, or much less likely a Pthumerian elder's. The knight's wig is suspiciously found separated from the rest of the knight's set on the roof of the library on a dead Black Church servant. The body is defended by lost children of antiquity. I believe that this behavior by the children, along with the bound widow attacking you if you steal from the entrance hall, indicates that either in the past or during the raid of the executioners the castle was looted. There are very few signs of the wealth of the family in the castle apart from the statues. What is interesting is that there are many mounted soldiers, statues, golden jugs, cups, in the practically untouched area of the castle revealed by the Crown of Illusions, which we will discuss in more detail in the next video. If the castle was looted, it does change the way we look at the executioners. We already know that they are not as righteous as one would initially think, but perhaps that they are corrupt as well. There does seem to be the possibility that the history of the executioners has been skewed to make them look better than they actually are, but we will get to that when we discuss Alfred in the next video. Well, I think we might wrap it up there, as we're still approaching the half-an-hour mark, just like in the last video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm really enjoying getting into Bloodborne's lore, and next time I think what we're going to discuss is the executioners in a lot of detail. Martyr Ligarius, Annalise, Queen Yharnam as well, a few other things about the castle, some Pthumerian relics, and then we'll have to think about what comes after that. But yeah, just as always, let's talk about it in the comments. Tell me what you thought, and we can have a nice discussion about the lore. Also, be sure to hit me up on Twitter and also the Facebook group. I always answer all my messages, and I think it would be great to have a chat with you guys about how Bloodborne's lore kind of compares to Dark Souls, and also where you want the future of the channel to go. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video, whether you're watching it now or in the morning or nighttime. I really appreciate the support, See you next time.